Hey everyone, welcome to Raqs Sharqi Flow Drills 1. I wanted to introduce you to the vocabulary that I will be using a lot in this course, and I hope that you can integrate into your own dancing and your own practice and your own way of thinking about movement in general. I wanted to take a minute to explain these terms so that when we do the drills, I won't be stopping to explain the terminology, and likely you will start to get the idea of what these terms mean just by repetition in the movement itself. But you always have this video to refer back to in case you're like, wait a minute, what was that again? Okay, so the first is the concept of isolation and integration. So you'll hear me talking about these two things in conjunction with each other, okay? So that's the first idea. The second is effort and release. When we have to drive something with the muscles and when we can release that movement. So all movement has a contraction of the muscle, and often on the other side, a stretching of the muscle of a different muscle. So we've got effort and release is the second concept. The third is gravity and momentum. And this is, obviously, we know what gravity is, things that fall to the ground. Momentum is when we can utilize a release often into gravity in order to propel the movement or the movement pathway. And then the fourth concept is isometric engagement of the muscles. So that is when you have, for example, if my bicep is contracting, then my tricep is elongating, right? And I can change the way that the movement looks by focusing on one or another. So if I'm only focusing on the contraction, it looks one way. If I'm focusing on the extension of the opposite muscle, it looks a different way. It also feels a different way. So this is about really getting in tune with what is working and how can we really engage the muscles along that whole pathway. Not because we want to dance in that kind of intensity, but your body remembers movement and movement pathways more when you practice through in this very intense way. And also it attunes you to where can I utilize these other concepts: effort and release, gravity and momentum, isolation versus integration. So I'm going to show you an example of each of these things real quick, and then I'm sure that you'll get the hang of it once we start drilling. Okay, so first is isolation and integration. So let's take this hip circle on one side, for example, right? So I'm thinking of dropping the hip down, back, up, and through. And you can kind of, if you're new to this dance and you don't have all of these isolations in your muscle memory yet, then often it's good to just spend time in it. Just look at how I'm doing it and just mirror me, okay? I'm staying high on the ball of the foot in this case. Okay, and now I'm going to think about it as an isolation. How can I make this as compact as possible? Okay, and then I'm going to tune in to what muscles are working, right? Oh, I feel a lift here. At the same time, I feel a stretch here. I'm going to engage the low belly. I'm going to actually engage the opposite side to bring that hip down and back. So I'm going to make this very effortful. And just by thinking about making it very effortful, like you're moving through wet cement, you'll start to feel like, oh yeah, my standing leg is also really doing a lot of work. Oh, my lower belly has to engage a lot, right? Okay, now we're going to look at effort and release. So where is the movement the most effortful? Where do I feel like, oh, I really have to try really hard to get through that? For me, it's really here on this lift and tuck, right? And then when I get to about here, because I'm up on the ball of my foot, my hip can actually kind of relax. I am utilizing my back, my standing leg, and I'm keeping that knee soft so that I have some play in that side. But really the effort's here, right? Like squeeze, squeeze, yeah? So that's the effort, and then I'm going to release. I'm going to do the same thing. Where can I release that movement? Release, release. So I started with the isolation, and then I looked for where's the effort and the release. In, release, right? And you might be then starting to notice like, oh, there's another concept at work here, which is gravity and momentum. So when I release a movement, I've generated some momentum by releasing into gravity, right? Down, down, catch it. When I get to here, if I don't engage any muscles, then I'm not going to be able to continue the shape. So it's this constant sort of picking up and setting down. And I can use this in my dance in a lot of ways, where sometimes I might want something to be pretty effortful the whole time, right? Pretty intense. And then I may go whoosh, right? Intense, intense, intense. Release it. Intense, intense, intense. So there's effort, release, gravity, and momentum. Now, once we start releasing the movement, the other thing that often presents itself is an integration, meaning what other things, what other parts of the body want to participate in this movement. And you can find this is not like an order of operations thing, like you have to do one before you do the other necessarily, but these are just concepts that are kind of all swirling around and that you can become aware of as far as what elements you can play with. Okay, so we've got the hip releasing, releasing. Okay, once I start to release it, I actually also start to notice that, well, my foot can also release. But then when I pick the hip back up, it sort of drags my foot back into place, right? So I could go release, release. And so then I do what I call making it a thing. So I found the integration. Now I kind of have two movements happening, right? I've got the circle on the hip, and now I've got the leg. And I could just keep that leg going the whole time. So that's working from hips down in this case, working from the isolation in the hips down through the feet. The other direction we can go is up, right? So let's look at that. I'm going to change sides because I'm getting tired on that other side. If I'm lifting, 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 here's the release, 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 release. I'm also going to look for, oh, you know what? When I lift this hip, kind of everything wants to come up, just a little bit, up, right? My standing leg typically wants to come up. And when we're looking at fluidity in dance, there's often this play in just kind of the buoyancy of the knees and this releasing into gravity, pushing off of the floor. Same idea here. So release, release. Oh, lift. So once I start to lift, I also notice that, well, my chest kind of wants to be involved. So I'm just going to let it happen. And I'm not trying to make anything, this is not a layer. I'm not doing this, right? It's not two things that are happening at the same time but that are unrelated. What I'm looking for is the related movements. And this might be different. It probably will be different for each of you based on not only your anatomy, but your own movement vocabulary and pathways and muscle memory that you already have in you. So this is a way to take those ideas that you already have or those pathways you already have and find a more fluid or easeful way through them. Okay, so I notice now that my chest kind of wants to lift. And for me, actually, the other thing that kind of wants to happen is my chest wants to do a little bit of a circle. Almost like a circle, like pulling the hip through. I don't know if that's a very natural thing to do, but it feels natural in my body. It's possible that I just have learned it somewhere along the way or in a choreography or something, and it's coming out. So it's good to know that about yourself too. What are my movements that I have in my toolbox, okay? So I'm releasing, up, release, up, release, up, release, up, release, okay? So I'm going to add that release of the foot. Let's just see what happens. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So I've got 2 integrations. I feel kind of noodly, and I'm keeping my arms a little bit relaxed just for the heck of it, but I could put them in a frame, right? If I really wanted to show off that articulation of the legs. So we'll talk about arms also. They can be an integration. They can also just be a frame for, as our dance form is often about the articulation of the torso and the spine. So in this case, you know, I may choose to go fully integration, isolation, whoosh, or something, okay? So I hope that gets you started on these concepts that you'll hear me say a lot, and we're gonna drill them, and you're gonna really get into the details of that, and I look forward to seeing you soon.